As the state's leading property and casualty insurance trade association, the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance plays a crucial role in safeguarding Wisconsinites. Alliance members provide vital insurance coverage, ensuring financial protection for individuals, businesses, and communities across the state. In times of need, they act as a reliable resource, helping residents recover from unforeseen events. Ultimately, the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance and its members contribute to the resilience and well-being of Wisconsin families and businesses by offering essential protection and support. WisI video of the WisPolitics Madison Luncheon series at the Madison Club is made possible with sponsorship support from the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance.
That's okay. All right, here we go. Okay, we're going to have a program today, everybody. Welcome to the happy spring edition of the WisPolitics Luncheon at the Madison Club. I'm Jeff Mayers from WisPolitics.com. And before we welcome our guests today, I want to thank our sponsors. We couldn't do it without you. Hush Blackwell Strategies, been with us from the beginning under some different names. American Family Insurance, Xcel Energy, Walmart, ARP Wisconsin, Anthem, and the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance, which is sponsoring the video done by Wisconsin Eye. So thank you, Wisconsin Insurance Alliance. Andy Franken, thank you, Wisconsin Eye. Upcoming here next month, April 25, we'll have the two major party chairs here to talk about elections and stuff, right? May 16th, we have the Assembly Democratic leader, Greta Neubauer. But today, we have the longest-serving speaker in Wisconsin history, Republican from Rochester, Robin Vos. Please welcome Robin Vos. So too bad there's nothing going on. What are you doing? What do you do for fun these days?
Hardly any time. Yeah, not much.
Okay, well, I guess we have to talk about a recall. You know, I said to you before, let's say I knew nothing about Wisconsin politics, which I have been accused of many times, but let's say I knew nothing about it, and I dropped it, I parachuted into Wisconsin, and somebody said, hey, you know, there's this recall effort against the longest-serving speaker in Wisconsin history. He's a conservative Republican from near Racine, and, he's shepherded all these conservative causes, and there's a recall going on against him, and I'd go like, huh? So how do you explain that to somebody who doesn't understand things like me?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Does anybody here have their cell phone with them? Okay. In case I break into Mandarin, I just want to make sure all of you use Google Translate. For those of you who didn't follow my recall, the whack jobs who were running the recall against me said I am an agent of the Chinese Communist Party. That was the last text that they sent out in desperation to show people that somehow I'm not a conservative Republican. So not only would you be an alien when you landed and not appreciate all the good things that you would do, but you would somehow think that the Chinese Communist Party is infiltrating our democracy at the state legislative level in Wisconsin, which is stupid. So the best thing I can say about the recall is that I started out late last year. Every time we go through a legislative cycle, you focus on the issues that are important. You get the budget done. You work on the bills that come in the fall. You get ready for the spring. You begin recruiting candidates. You kind of have this dance that everybody plays. And every fall, you have to kind of ask yourself, well, what's going to happen next year and how's it going to work? I did not appreciate the fact that Mike Lindell and all the whack jobs that are associated with this sect of our party were going to spend a disproportionate amount of time and their effort on not beating a Democrat, not saying, wow, Tammy Baldwin, out of touch with reality, let's go focus on Eric Hovde, or maybe even let's make sure Donald Trump wins. We are going to take almost $1 million, that's what we're estimating they spent, almost $1 million to hire out-of-state recall people, almost all Democrats, to come into Wisconsin and try to get 8,000 signatures in my district. Now, we know, and we'll see in the filing tomorrow, they were incredibly ineffective and probably made me way stronger than I was 6 months ago. We went through that entire cycle. There are people who are always unhappy with whatever you do, right? You can't make everybody happy, and the goal is to try to do the best you can. But Michelle and I were working at a fish fry on Friday night at our parish, and honestly, one of the workers came over to Michelle and said, "How do you guys get anything done?" Because everybody wanted to come and talk about the recall. Tell me the story of how we were approached at Quick Trip, and they told the guy no, and they stopped at their house, and they saw the person at the high school, and they went through the whole thing. So they have really taken what was supposed to be used rarely, and when somebody commits a crime or has some kind of a major problem, and they have tried to make the recall into a professional grift. The people who came in, almost out of state, the guy who directed it, he changed his name legally so it could appear on the ballot as Colonel. He's from Arkansas. He's a failed congressional candidate who ran against French Hill, lost. So that's kind of the caliber of people that they brought in, looking to say, how could they get rich? And I guess we'll see in their campaign finance reports in July if they did, but that's what it appears. It was mostly just a grift.
Okay, so do you think are you saying you don't think it's going to happen in the end? Right? You don't think the recall will happen? Do you think it's going to get tossed?
Yeah, I guess I'm fast forwarding. I'm sorry. We have two different organizations, an outside group and about 50 volunteers of folks that we had, have data entered in all of the names. If you believe the people who signed the recall, I signed my own recall. My name was in there. There were, I think, 300 or 400 people who were duplicated. We have people who literally, we have one woman who's going to sign an affidavit, actually her power of attorney will, because she has dementia. She can't even sign her own name. Her name was on there. We have a person who, unfortunately, in Racine County, a sheriff's deputy, was actually accused of dealing with enticement of children. He is in jail. He has been in jail the entire time, but somehow he found the time to sign the recall. So there's a ton of fraud. And the challenge that we have is the people who organize this are so out of touch with reality. And I'm just going to keep saying it over and over again. They are morons. They are stupid. These people do not deserve the respect that anybody gave them in the media over the course of the last three months. But they literally now believe that I organized the recall and that I went out and found people to circulate it to discredit their efforts. Okay? What is the definition of that in the dictionary? You're a moron, right? That is who these people are.
What do you really think?
I am so sick of it. I mean, we are at a time when the state of Wisconsin is on the precipice of what are we going to do, right? We have a legislature that is more competitive because of the gerrymandering done by Governor Evers in the court. We know it's going to be a challenging election cycle. We have to do everything we can to make sure that we come back with a good, strong majority, and these people are dead set on trying to help our Democratic colleagues. I do not get that. But again, it's a free country. They have the right to do it, and unfortunately they convinced some rich people somewhere to invest in this effort instead of investing in something that was actually productive.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, you're predicting that you're going to file a challenge and the Elections Commission is going to reject the recall effort.
As long as the state Supreme Court doesn't decide that they're going to interfere in the process, I feel very comfortable. So remember, they said they submitted 10,700 signatures. The Elections Commission, on a very cursory review, and you can ask any of our 50 volunteers. I did it last night. You could ask anybody who data entered in names. I spent about 6 hours data entering in names myself. The recall circulator didn't sign at the bottom. They forgot to put in the municipality. We have a ton of examples where they misspelled the streets. I don't know about all of you, but I know how to spell Rock Ridge Road, right? I know exactly how to spell my own address. So there is so much fraud in there. I am very confident that maybe it'll be less than half of the names are even valid. So a whole lot of it. A lot of people who, when you asked, we found it, we have affidavits from people who, when they signed the recall, they would go up to them and say, hey, do you want to sign a petition to support Donald Trump? And if they said, no, I hate Donald Trump, but we have a different one for you to circulate to sign to support public education. Right? They would just outright lie to people. That's also illegal. You can't lie to people to get their name on the ballot, right? So I hope we will be able to have affidavits. I hope our district attorney will be able to prosecute these people for committing crimes, because the only people that I have seen so far that have committed election fraud are the very people who have done this in calendar year 2024. They are the ones who are the fraudsters. And we need to make sure that the people know that we all believe in election integrity, and even when people who supposedly agree with us commit it, they should go to prison just like anybody else.
Okay, there's a lot there. So anyway, the Supreme Court back to the Supreme Court. They're still going to determine which district this would take place in if it happens. They're taking some filings this week, and which district should they say it would take place in?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's going to happen, but hypothetically, if it does, it just goes to show why, if you remember, like so many things that happen in the legislature, the assembly passed a good idea and it died in the other chamber. We'll talk about a lot of those, I'm sure, over the course of the next couple minutes. But if you remember back about a decade ago, we passed a reform of the recall statutes after Governor Walker was wrongfully recalled, after the state Senate had the same thing happen. The state Senate, for whatever reason, never took it up. But I think if you have a recall, it should actually be because there's a reason, not because you're not loyal enough to somebody else. I think that you should have to be a resident of the state to actually circulate. I don't think you should be able to fly in people from out of state and pay them by the signature, because we now know being paid by the signature means you're probably going to fudge on the numbers, like we saw here. So I think the Supreme Court has to make their decision, but I don't think it's going to be because of the recall, because I don't think it's going to happen in Wisconsin.
Okay, so what does this all say about the Republican Party? Your Republican Party. I mean, your Republican Party, you just labeled a lot of them wackos. Mm-hmm. And worse, I'm probably not repeating all the good stuff that you said, but anyway.
Yeah, the people who organize this recall are fringy. Let's just put it that way, okay? The thing that gave me an awful lot of confidence during the course of this entire effort is that Michelle and I, everywhere we went, normal people would come up and say, oh, thank you for what you're doing. I can't believe this is what some people are doing to you. I can't believe that we're focused on issues that are 3 years old, not on what we're going to do about the border, what we're going to do about taxes, what we're going to do about education. So I am now more firmly of the belief that 80 or 90% of Republicans are exactly like they have always been. But we have some new people in the party. We have some people who are just misguided, who have this belief, and they really believe it. I don't understand it because I have met them. They really believe it. They think Democrats and Republicans could just change their name tags at the door and they're the same thing, right? Anybody who understands politics knows that that could not be further from the truth and not further from reality. So I think you now see that even on the left with people, because they disagree with President Biden's position on Gaza. They are willing to say, I am uncommitted because one issue is all that matters, because it's what I see on Facebook or TikTok or wherever it is. So I think the Republicans, at least in Wisconsin, because of this one effort, may have been heightened in being seen that way. But I think it's probably an equal share on both ends of the extremes. And it's up to Americans to say, I want to be the 90% that's normal. I don't want to be the 5% in either end that's crazy. And I think that's where most Republicans I see, it's where most Republican legislators are, it's where most people who support our party are, and I just don't want to let the people who are the loudest and the goofiest become the face of either party.
Okay, I think you alluded to this already, but there's another part of this. It's a loyalty test. You didn't pass Trump's loyalty test, and so he and his supporters are out to get you.
Maybe. Again,
maybe they put up a candidate against you in your primary 2 years ago.
Yeah. But I think the difference is that I don't think that Donald Trump is sitting at Mar-a-Lago, getting daily updates on the recall number count in Wisconsin, right? I don't think that actually happened. Do I think that people who are part of the grifting operations were involved? Absolutely. But who they are and what they did, I don't know. But the difference is, I want a Republican Party that has strong beliefs and that people argue for their belief system. I will still say it. I think Ron DeSantis would have been a better general election nominee to beat Joe Biden, but it doesn't matter. He's already dropped out. We have our nominee. It's going to be Donald Trump. We get two choices when everybody walks into the ballot box, unless you want to vote third party and be a protest, right? So we have who we have, and every American's going to make that decision. I already came out and endorsed Donald Trump because he is better in my mind than Joe Biden. Are there people that are better than Donald Trump? I would have preferred Ron DeSantis. I would have preferred others. But we have a primary for a reason. And that's what frustrated me so much, even about last election cycle. We had the primary. It was close. I had to go and fight to make sure people knew that I was representing them. And I won. But then those people still went ahead later and said, we're going to go and have a write-in effort because they couldn't accept the results of the primary. which is ironic considering the fact that they're now saying I'm supposed to just line up and do whatever Donald Trump says. When I agree with Donald Trump, I'm going to be his biggest cheerleader. But when he says the wrong thing, I'm also going to say we're Americans. We're not supposed to all fall in line like somebody's royalty, and we have to genuflect, right? I don't want that to be like that.
Okay, so in 2022, it looked like the abortion issue plus Trump equaled losing in Wisconsin for a lot of Republicans, especially statewide. What would change that in 2024?
Well, first of all, I think statewide Democrats, because they have more money and are more effective at bending the truth than we are, have a tendency to convince low information voters that things are true when they might only be shades of truth. Okay? Every single ad that they ran against Tim Michels, where they talked about him not being fair with female employees, we all know if you know the truth, you know that there were 6 cases, all of which were proven to be innocent. So what I would say is, great, good job. That's exactly what we want, is somebody who had a stellar track record. But they spent $100 million lying about Tim Michels, and that's one of the reasons that he lost. Then you added in the abortion issue, which for a lot of people was a shock to the system. Now, Wisconsin Republicans, I think, took a very reasonable position. The Dane County judge, whether we like it or not, has said that abortion is going to be pre-Dobbs, which is 20 weeks to be allowed in the state. I think that's far too much. We passed a bill with almost every Republican in the Assembly voting yes, saying we think a more reasonable number is similar to what it is in Europe at 14 weeks. We have to try to find some consensus to be able to say, let's work on that and move forward. Our colleagues in the state Senate said they wanted the 1849 law. Now, if we run on the 1849 law, I think that is a political loser, which is why I think we need to be able to talk about what is more reasonable. Where is Wisconsin? We need to work on convincing people that there's a good reason to not have an abortion and not just have it be based on government policy. I am proudly pro-life, and I will always be that way. But I also want to have a reasonable way to have people say it's okay to have a difference of opinion and be a Republican. We don't have a litmus test that if you don't believe exactly this, go join the other party.
Okay, so I'm going to ask it again. What's the difference between 2022 atmospherics and 2024? Because you still have uncertainty on the abortion issue on the Republican side, and you're going to have Trump at the top of the ticket.
Well, most of you probably don't even know this. What is Donald Trump's position on abortion today? He's okay with a 16-week abortion ban. 16 weeks. So that means basically way past the first trimester. That is probably the centrist position where most Americans are. We had 14 weeks, which I think is also a very centrist position. So I think for them to be able to mischaracterize his position on abortion, they're going to have to do what they do well, which is to lie. They're going to have to lie about Donald Trump's position. Well, I don't think Donald Trump's going to let him get away with that. So I'm sure you're going to hear a lot about abortion, but he's going to talk about what his position is. They're going to lie about what his position is, and we'll see what the truth, if it can get through or not.
All right, so let's go to, you called it gerrymandering on the Democratic side, but you guys voted for the Evers maps.
Sometimes in politics, you are forced to pick the best of the worst situations. Okay. So take Racine County, where I live. I went back and looked at the maps. If you remember, in the 1960s, there was a U.S. Supreme Court case which changed the way that legislative districts were drawn. Prior to that, we actually had a system that was more similar to like the U.S. Senate, where state Senate districts were really based on geography and assembly districts were based on population. That was done away with in the 1960s, so the first time we actually had a map which was drawn with equal population in all districts was in 1970. So we have to kind of go back. That's the first time that you can have as a relative baseline. So we've had 5 times of drawing districts. In all of those times, the majority of seats in Racine County have been only in Racine County, right? This time around, they gerrymandered it so Bob Whitkey's district goes up to Franklin. My district now has half of Walworth County, and you have other districts in Kenosha coming up. Well, why was that done? It's because Racine County has been trending Republican, and they wanted to break it up to try to give themselves more seats. Why did they do it around Wausau? Why did they do it around Eau Claire? Why did they do it in Green Bay? We know what they did. It was political gerrymandering. You know, if you look at the maps that were drawn by a court, you can roll your eyes all you want to. But if you, no, it's not you, the guy in front of you. But if you look at what happened and you're honest about it, a court that drew the lines at the state Supreme Court basically had districts that looked very much like the ones that we had. A court that was drawn at the federal level, very much like the lines that we had. Again, drawn by a court, all very similar to how it's been for the past 50 years. The Democrats had to radically gerrymander in order to even give themselves a chance. Now, they're going to probably come back, my guess is around 45 seats. That's what we're predicting when we kind of look at everything. So it's certainly going to be closer. But what my Democratic colleagues fail to realize is that the closer the margins, the harder compromise actually becomes. They think, oh, if it's 52-48, we're going to have all this compromise that'll happen. That's actually the opposite. If you look around the country, the closer the margin, the harder it is to reach consensus, because we now know our Democratic colleagues, even when they were at about 1/3, are absolutely awful negotiators. They don't know how to ask for things that are realistic. They ask for too much that a conservative could never give. What do they always say in negotiation? You have to be able to ask what your opponent can give, or it's not sincere.
Well, maybe they'll be better if they have 45.
They won't be.
Well,
They'll get less.
And how can you be so certain that it's going to be 45?
That's my prediction. I mean, if you go through the numbers, it's pretty easy. There are 46 seats, which are 55% or more. There are 3 seats which lean Republican, which is between 51 and 40 and 55. So we start off with basically 49 seats. We have to win one competitive election between 51 and 40% Democrat. So I feel very confident we're going to win one, considering the fact that if you go back all the way to that 1994 election, we have won almost every competitive seat for the past 35 years. There's only a couple that we have not won. So if you look at our track record, competitive seats, Republicans normally win them. Democrats usually find people who are way outside the mainstream, belong in downtown Madison. They represent those values very well, but they don't represent the district that they actually want to live in. So I'm pretty confident.
Okay, so the number of swing seats will increase.
Actually, it's funny. So again, under the Democrat gerrymander, you're going to see, I think there's 12 or 13 seats that just so happen to be exactly 45% Republican. Well, that is about the number that it is hard for somebody to win beyond that. So they knew exactly what they were doing. So there aren't going to be anywhere near the number of swing seats. They're going to say they are, but they're challenging, right, if you have them lean one way. We know that Republicans have never lost a district in the past 50 years that is 55% or more Republican, not one time. Democrats have. Actually, Joe Nylons, when he beat the sitting speaker, was in a district that was 38% Republican. So we have the ability to reach across, find consensus, get good candidates. Democrats don't. So I think our upside is a lot higher than theirs, but the number of swing seats actually was reduced by the map that they put forward, not expanded.
Okay, in terms of gerrymandering, okay, I mean, you're the longest-serving speaker in Wisconsin history, so you've been around a little bit. Yeah. All right, so when you guys had the advantage, you guys pressed your advantage and made seats that worked for you. I mean, isn't that, because it's a political process, those who have the gold will make the rules?
Well, if it was only true, the gold is actually, for your terms, that's why we wanted to do a nonpartisan process. That's why we wanted to try to pass a map in the legislature. The Democrats voted against every single map, even the one brought forward by the People's Maps Commission. So why did they vote against that?
Okay, but now Evers, when he signed his maps that you guys passed, said that he wanted that, and he was going to press for a nonpartisan process. Do you take him at his word on that?
I don't.
Why?
I think he's a phony.
Why?
I think the entire idea of saying that he wants to have a nonpartisan process, that's absolutely a lie. We gave him the opportunity for a nonpartisan process. We actually took his map. And if you just think about the very basics of fairness, okay, and all of us in this room are involved in politics in one way or another, you had 7 people who were drawn outside their district by sometimes 15 feet, right? So why would you make a person have to move 15 feet if you cared about basic fairness, right? It was all about gerrymandering. So this idea that somehow they were holier than thou and they're going to make sure it's a fair map, it's the opposite. So trusting the same people who did the gerrymander. And remember, when Republicans had the chance to do that, even in 2012, we didn't draw people 15 feet outside their district. We tried to say, if you're in your district, you should have a right to represent that. So when we had the ability and total control, we could have done the same thing and probably pressed our advantage. We chose not to do that because it's the wrong thing to do. Democrats had no preconceptions to say we want to at least be fair with the people who've gotten elected. They didn't care. So luckily for us, Pat Snyder is moving a couple hundred feet to be in his district. Bob Whitkey is moving a couple hundred feet to be in his district. A whole lot of incumbents are moving. Now, I don't think
because they have to.
Because we gave a map to Governor Evers that had those very small tweaks that didn't affect the numbers at all. The same maps would have been the exact same result. So he could have done something which is a basic human fairness, which is to say, why should I make this guy sell his house to have to move 15 feet? And he chose to say no, because he wanted to play political games with that. Well, that's what's going to happen. People are going to move anyways, but you are now going to come back with a whole bunch of people. And let me tell you, who do you think is more likely to want to find a compromise with the other side? People who gave them the benefit of the doubt to say, why would I make this person sell their house and move 15 feet? Or somebody that had to do it? Well, now you've got a whole bunch of people who realize that Tony Evers is the political animal that he is. For people who think that he isn't, you're just not watching. Tony Evers, or whoever controls him, I don't know, but whoever makes the decisions in the administration made these on raw, partisan, political reasons. And that's the reality. Now, it's done, it's over, it's behind us. But the idea of saying somehow that we're going to go forward and have this different process and it's going to be all hunky-dory, well, that's just not going to happen.
Okay, so you're going to have a ton of freshmen in the assembly, maybe more on the Democratic side than in your caucus. You only have one retirement so far. What's that? Is that going to change the tenor? I mean, you said, I think, that it's going to be more partisan with 45 seats than otherwise. But if you have new people, are they also going to be instantly partisanized? You don't think the tenor of if you have closer margins, that the tenor of the debate will change?
Absolutely not. So let's just look at the democratic process that they have for finding their candidates. If you look at the people that we get on the Republican side, we will normally try to find perhaps a local elected official. We will find somebody who perhaps is a small business owner, a retiree, had a successful career. I kind of say that's one of the things that we have as our secret sauce. We find people who represent the community. If you look at most of the folks who are on the Democratic side, they come from the activist base. And again, if you're in a super safe seat and you were a community organizer your whole life, like Greta Neubauer was, okay, more power to you. But that is a wholly different way of operating than somebody who had to find consensus as a business owner, had to serve on their city council or their village board for a decade or 20 years to say, look, I don't always agree with everything, but I know sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. So I think the very nature of the people that they recruit make finding consensus in the middle very, very challenging. And we've seen that over the course of the past decade.
Well, I guess you see that in the House of Representatives, too.
On both sides.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the session. At the beginning of the 2-year session, if you had told me that there would have been all these bipartisan agreements signed, passed by the legislature and signed by the governor, from the Brewers maintenance at AmFam Field to shared revenue to school choice, I would have said, no, I don't think that's going to happen because the legislature doesn't get along with the governor. So why'd all that happen?
I think there was a lot of problems that have just been percolating for some time that we had to find an answer for. Last summer, 2 summers ago, I spent time with a lot of my friends in county government and local government and just basically learned a lot of the issues that they're struggling with. And remember, inflation probably changed a lot of people's mindsets about how we have to do things differently. I don't think most of us 3 or 4 years ago would have predicted 8, 9, 10% inflation, and we're still seeing in a lot of industries that number is not going down. So healthcare, huge problem right now. How do we deal with the cost of everything associated with exploding wages? That's hard for every entity, be it a hospital or a manufacturing company or government. So I think we just had to get to the point where we had the discussions. Now, the way it was most effective is, frankly, Governor Evers was never in the room, right? He was not a part of any of the negotiations. It was Republicans sitting in a room, finding consensus, and then sending it to the governor saying, we hope you'll sign this. And in most cases, that happened. The only time when there was significant Democratic input was really for the Brewers Stadium deal, where they had the opportunity, not the governor, not the legislators per se, but some of the governor's staff who were directly involved in helping to make that deal finally possible. So there were some times when it was actually productive, but for the most part, I give a lot of credit to my Republican colleagues who sat around the table, find a way to get consensus, generated it inside our caucus, and then took it out and were able to pass it. I mean, if you remember, I think it was every single bill that we did had enough Republicans to vote for it, even without bipartisan support. And of course, we want that. That's not a bad thing. But it didn't start out as our modus operandi.
Okay, but you knew, hanging over all that are vetoes, so you're trying to get past something that will get signed. Do you think that isn't that the motivation, or isn't that part of what you...
Yeah, of course I wanted to get signed, but we're not going to sacrifice our principles or do things that are against our core beliefs in order to get a signature, right? I mean, so as an example with shared revenue, I think we struck a very good deal because we had a lot of priorities that were focused on things that were outside of just shared revenue. I mean, we need to make sure that we get security officers inside the schools of MPS. I mean, that was part of our deal. It's in the law. It has to happen. They're stonewalling that. Well, if they want to get an increase in school aid the next time or have anything that's meaningful, they have to follow the existing law and show that you can live with the consequences of the deals that were struck. I give a lot of credit to the county executive and the mayor. They were in the room. They were negotiating. They were actually on top of it. They engaged in a meaningful way and understood where the pressure points were. That's what should happen, but that's not what usually happens in Madison with the folks who are here.
Okay, so of all those things that we're kind of talking about, and I mentioned some, what's the biggest one you think, the biggest achievement of the Republican legislature and the governor this session?
I mean, there were obviously a lot. If I think about the long-term impact for what the biggest challenges that we have, it was really around education. The very idea that we have somewhere between 30 and 50%, depending on the district, of kids who are not reading at grade level. And why is that not like a 5-alarm fire that people are saying something is wrong? When we're spending $15,000 per child to educate them and they don't come out reading at grade level, there is something fundamentally wrong with what we're doing. So the fact that we got a literacy bill through is a major advance. The fact that DPI has tried to basically screw it up since is a big disappointment. You saw in the Finance Committee they wanted to expand the number of people who would be able to do the literacy testing and coaching and all those things. Well, there's a reason that you had a small, very effective number in most states that have adopted this. We wanted to copy that model. So I'm very optimistic that we're going to hopefully within 5 to 7 years have people reading closer, if not at grade level. That's big. And then the second thing is it's really our school funding. I mean, the way that Governor Evers did the creative veto, if we had a fair Supreme Court, they would look and say that cannot stand. You cannot do a permanent increase in funding by a creative use of the veto. I think we'll have a constitutional amendment work its way through to try to fix that in the second session. But I also think the fact that we now made more choices for parents, that is a huge thing. Most parents will always choose a public school because in their community they're doing a good job. But I want to make sure that for parents who don't think they're meeting the needs of their kids, they have a choice school to be able to go to. And we had a big increase there. So I think education was kind of the untold story of this entire session, and a lot of the funding that went into it and a lot of the effort behind it. Hopefully it'll pay dividends over time.
All right, so the biggest disappointments, we were talking earlier, I think, the right of first refusal bill. I mean, you guys passed that, the Assembly passed that on a voice vote, and then the Senate didn't end up taking it up.
Yeah. Well, here's an example of something that I think is wrong. We have very strict lobbying laws in Wisconsin, and we should. Every time a lobbyist meets or talks with a legislator, it's documented, and the public have a right to know how many hours went into this bill, positive, negative, who lobbied at it, and all those kind of things. But for an entity to be able to donate to an outside group and have them do their lobbying for them, all unreportable, seems to me to be a big, huge loophole in campaign finance law that we need to fix. We know that in the Rofer bill, it was so simple once you explain it to people. Do you want to have people in Washington, D.C., or people in Madison deciding who's going to build our transmission lines? I think most people would say, I have a better chance to influence a person in Wisconsin than a person in Washington, D.C. And once people knew that, it was a fairly easy argument. But then you had a whole bunch of people being paid to lobby through email, telephones, social media, paid lobbyists, all those kind of things, saying it's all about competition. Well, competition was already built in the bill. So it was literally, again, just falsehoods being paid for by somebody out of state. Well, why wouldn't we make sure that they're following the same lobbying laws that all the people did who were in favor of the bill? So
go ahead. Why don't you say who you're talking about?
Well, it depends. I mean, one would be Americans for Prosperity. I mean, that's a prime group.
It's a conservative group.
It's a conservative group, but
they may have supported some of your causes.
Well, they're with me 99% of the time, and I think they do really good work. But at the same time, if you're going to lobby, you have to be under the same lobbying laws that everybody else is. We can't say we're going to make you exempt just because we like the outcome of a lot of things that you do. So, again, a lot of groups, Wisconsin Right to Life. I am with them 99 or 100% of the time, but they still register as lobbyists. They still have to put their name on the documents to say when they lobby for or against a bill. Should be that way with everybody. So I think a lot of what happened with Rofer was really misinformation being spread by people who are paid to do so. That's kind of the definition of a lobbyist, frankly. So I don't know why you wouldn't have to have the same standards whether you're pro or con.
Okay, so that bill will come back.
Probably, yeah.
And, well, it's up to the Senate.
Yeah, I can't.
Okay, the Senate. I mean, the Senate's Republican, the Assembly's Republican. Many predict that'll be the case after the elections, too, but with smaller margins. And I'm just wondering, things like medical marijuana, it's like, it's quizzical. I mean, there's even some support in the Republican caucus for it, but you folks propose a bill, they don't like it, and then it just dies. So why isn't there, like, the internal compromise that you talked about with all these bills that passed? What makes medical marijuana different?
Well, number one, you have to have willing partners. So we took a lot. I mean, it's just different, and I have learned this over my time in the Capitol. There's a reason that the founders of our country and frankly the framers of Wisconsin wanted two chambers, different dynamics, different constituencies, different way of operating, and that's healthy. I don't want the Senate to become like the Assembly, and I don't want the Assembly to become like the Senate, right? So our process is just much more collaborative. In order for us to reach consensus, we talk a lot. So we probably took, I don't know, Jenny, 6 months to put together a working group. We had 9 or 10 legislators meeting with people to find a consensus, constantly meeting with all of our other colleagues to say, what could you support if we did a medical marijuana bill? We came up with one. We presented to our caucus. No one had major concerns. It would have passed our chamber, right? It would have. I don't know what process the Senate used to be able to generate consensus on whether or not they wanted to find an answer on medical marijuana. You'll have to ask them that.
No, but why didn't you go to Lemahue and say, hey, what's the deal? Let's move this bill.
Well, maybe that happened. I'm just saying, so sometimes you have to have a willing partner, and then sometimes people just were like, it's too much for us, or, we don't want to make that happen. I mean, just the basic idea, we started out in our caucus with the idea that none of us, I shouldn't say none of us, almost none of us support recreational marijuana. I do not want us to become Illinois or Michigan or Minnesota, where we were just in Illinois last weekend. Everywhere you walk in the city, we saw the Eagles concert, it was awesome, but everywhere you walk in Chicago, it smells like marijuana. Right? I don't want that to be Wisconsin. So we tried to find a way to say, if you're really suffering from a life-debilitating disease, I want to make sure that you have access to things that would ease your pain. Right? That was our consensus that our caucus reached, saying we don't want to get it to be recreational. Well, every state that we've talked to where they started medicinal, it eventually became recreational because the very folks who make money off of medicinal use the profits to make recreational because they wanted more money. I don't want that to happen. So we wanted to have state-owned dispensaries. They tried it. They talked about it in Utah. There's a good way for us to do it. I think it could generate consensus and actually help people. But if, again, you are not in favor of something that is non-traditional, you're probably not interested in finding a consensus, and that's kind of what we got to.
Well, then, I would then unless the Senate becomes Democratic, it's not going to happen.
You'd have to ask them. I don't know who opposed it. I don't know what the process was. Again, this is a classic example of what I was saying earlier, though, where the Democrats are bad at negotiating. You would think if they really believe that people need help with medicinal marijuana, they would have come to us saying, what can we do to try to make sure we have consensus or we can show we're unanimous in taking this step to help people who need medicinal? And instead, what did Governor Evers and the Democrats do? Say, oh, this is just our first step to recreational, knowing that's a dead set problem for every single Republican, save a few. So I think the problem is, if you really want to get it done, taking small steps is what Assembly Republicans have learned over the last 30 years are the ways to make change. Some of our colleagues on the other side just can't understand that.
Okay, well, let's take a couple of questions from the audience. We end at 1 o'clock, so somebody who wants to shout out a question, I'll call on you. Okay, Ron, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to spend a minute or two just talk about your own thoughts and your own opinions. And we know with respect to Trump that we believe that he's innocent until guilty, obviously, although there's some circumstances where he's now $500 million out there, right?
Sure. Well, I would start by saying that I bet if they did well, they already have. If they've done surveys, most Americans don't like either of the two choices. We have a nation of 360 million people. You would think there would be one person who's running that would be hopeful and optimistic. Joe Biden has his own legal problems, right? So I think both of them have legal problems. Both of them have made bad decisions in the past that call into question their ability to make good decisions going forward. But that's both of them. So if you accept that both of them have those same foibles, well, now you have to make a choice on who's going to be best for the country, especially who's going to be best for the policies of America. I still believe that whoever the president is, they are a figurehead. It is the people underneath that make government work, right? The president gives a speech, but he doesn't care about the policies. He's not the one who actually implements the rules or makes sure that the laws are written the way that they are. That's the job of the able people underneath them. So I think whoever wins the presidency, they're going to have able people underneath them to be able to put the policies into place. I prefer one that says we need to have controls at the border. We cannot have 8, 9, 10 million people coming in, many of which are criminals, many of which are good, decent people wanting a better life. So I don't want to characterize everybody the same. But you would think we would have something where we could control the border better than we do now. You would look at the deficit spending that we have. We are driving inflation in a way that I don't know how we ever wring it out if we have massive federal spending with almost no oversight and controls based on how much money we actually bring in, right? All these things that I look and say, I don't love everything about Donald Trump, but I like a lot of his policies, and I think our country is better off than it was right now today. So Americans are going to make that judgment. So I don't think we should base it on whether or not somebody committed a crime. I don't think probably either of them did, Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And I think for Americans to believe that the other guy committed crimes and that's why they're going to vote for their guy isn't a good enough reason for me. I want to know what they're going to do. Why are they going to be best for the country? What are the policies that matter? And I wish politics was more like that than it is by I'm going to vote against the other person instead of for my guy. Actually, if you look at the polling, believe it or not, most people who are voting for Donald Trump say they are voting for Donald Trump. Most people who are voting for Joe Biden are voting against Donald Trump. I want people who are voting for their person and their policies, not because they think the other person's worse.
Okay, I got to interject. So Paul Ryan, your former congressman, has a more rigid stand. He's not going to endorse Trump. He's not going to go to the convention if Trump's the nominee. Does that strike you as being outside the bounds of most Republicans in the 1st District?
No. I understand why. I am friends with Paul Ryan. I am proud. He was a great congressman. He did a wonderful job, and I am not going to say a single negative thing about him because he's one of the smartest people that I know. Okay? I think reasonable people can come to different conclusions. I think that the country is better off if Joe Biden is not the president in the next 4 years, and I think the Republican Party is better off if we have the ability to show what we stand for and what we believe in. I think that if Joe Biden is in there for another 4 years, it will be so incredibly difficult for us to pull the country back from the brink. I'm not sure we can do it. So I'm not willing to take the chance that a Democratic Congress with no filibuster and Joe Biden as the president is going to go in a way that we can recover from. I worry we can't.
All right, other questions? Over here?
I'm always open to listening. Yeah, that's the way the conversation started with shared revenue. So to the benefit of all the local government groups, they did a good job of kind of working with their members to talk to legislators and build a consensus. So that was a big success. I've talked about this for the entire time I've been speaker, and I have tried and failed many times. I think we should have had tolling. If we had tolling in right now, like most states, we were just in Florida, they're not even going to have the tag anymore. It's all toll by license plate, and they bill you weekly. There's a lot of ways you can do this to be able to generate the revenues in-state and out-of-state to be able to pay for our roads. We need to do something about making sure we are keeping up with costs. I mean, we know what construction costs are. They are going through the roof, and our revenues have done nothing to keep up with it over time. And putting something else on the general fund, which means we have less money for Medicaid, less money for schools, less money for and natural resources, whatever it's going to be, I don't think that's necessarily a wise decision either. So, yeah, I am all ears. I am willing to look at any possible solution, but it has to be focused in reality of saying, how are we going to pay for roads that will actually work in the long run? A small increase is better than nothing, which is what we've kind of done for a while. But it's not even coming close to keeping pace with the cost of inflation. So, yeah, I'm certainly open to that.
There's a taxpayer crying right now. So, okay, what about there's a $3 billion surplus. There's a giant infrastructure bill that went through. Mm-hmm. Why isn't he getting the money that he needs with those two things?
Well, first of all, the infrastructure bill at the national level, again, filled with pork, all kinds of things that are not focused in reality. I mean, a lot of it is focused on the political agenda that the people who passed it wanted, saying it's a transportation bill, right? I mean, the idea that we're going to have, I mean, it's such a waste that we are spending all this money on electric charging stations, that we got this $75 million grant. It should have never happened. It is a big, huge boondoggle, right? That money is coming into Wisconsin, and we're going to have a few electric charging stations when probably 10 years from now, electric vehicles aren't going to be the reality of where our nation is. But because politicians got, I mean, we went to the Consumer Electronics Show with NCSL, which is the nation's largest consumer electronics show. It was huge, hundreds of thousands of square feet. There were 45 different electric charging companies that were there trying to sell people on their electric charging. So this is not about the future. It's about people making money off the government. That's what it's really all about. And I feel like a lot of our transportation problems are not focused on the real reality, which is paying for roads, making sure people have 4 tires on the road to be able to have it happen. It's now having hundreds of billions of dollars going to electric charging stations, which don't fix a single road, don't do anything. And now we have less money to actually go into highways and construction. So, yeah, we say we have an infrastructure bill, but less of it is going into actually building highways, and most of it's going into somebody else's agenda, which, again, makes everybody at the local level and the state level frustrated because it's not where we need to be putting our money.
All right, what about the $3 billion surplus?
Yeah, well, that's something I would prefer that money to go back. And don't forget, in every area of the budget, we were generous because we knew we had to deal with inflation. We did pretty big increases for nursing homes and hospitals. We did pretty big increases for schools. We did a very large increase, comparatively speaking, for wages for our public employees. We have a huge increase for prison guards, and they deserve it. All those were deserved. But even after all those record increases in spending, there was a lot of money left over for a tax cut. That's where our priority was. Governor Evers, even though he said he favors a middle-class tax cut, he used that to get reelected, but then the reality is he just can't find one he can support. So all the money that's in there is not like we didn't spend enough on all the other priorities. It's that we had a lot of priorities, including tax cuts, and that's the one that didn't get across the finish line. So I do not support allocating all that to more spending. I want that to be used for a tax cut. So in my mind, that money's kind of off the table. We are not going to use it to grow the size of government or any of those kind of things. We're going to give it back to the people who are suffering with sky-high inflation, high costs all across their own family budget.
So if we're not going to be driving electric cars in 10 years, what are we going to be driving? What's going to fuel the cars?
Well, it's a combination of things. I mean, at this Consumer Electronics Show, believe it or not, one of the things that they are focusing a lot of their effort on is having solar cells on the top of your car. So when you're driving, you will recharge your car automatically. You will not need to plug into the electric grid. That's one possibility. I'm not a scientist, right?
I don't know.
But I also think there's hydrogen cars, which are becoming bigger and bigger. If you go on LinkedIn, you will see there's something called NAX, N-A-X, where it's hydrogen fuel cells. There are all kinds of technologies that are being developed that the private sector is going to be way ahead of the government on. The government is always 10 years behind and $100 billion short of whatever the real reality is. We're going to spend it on old technology, which is what we're doing right now. And the reality is, 10 years from now, when we have all these charging stations developed, they're going to become a place where you go and you park your car in front of it going, wow, I wonder why we still have those. Just like payphones. That is exactly what's going to happen. But imagine if instead of the private sector developing the payphones, the government paid people thousands of dollars to put in every single payphone just as the cell phone was coming out. Would that be a good investment? No. But that's the kind of thing that the federal and the state government usually does. So we just got to stop that from happening.
Okay. I thought that was going to be a one-word answer, but anyway. Okay, you have a question over here.
So I can't, and I'm happy to talk to you afterward, I can't think of a single example where we cut funding. I can't think of one. Now, people ask for $100 and we give $75 and they call it a $25 cut. I have a lot of that, right, because there's a lot of people who have wish lists. But we have been very generous, and rightfully so. I mean, the state of Wisconsin for special needs kids not only has the special needs scholarships on the choice program for the private sector, the private side, but on the public side, we now cover the cost. I think it's above $30,000. I think the state of Wisconsin covers either 90 or 100% of the very high-cost kids. So if anything, the state of Wisconsin has doubled down on helping kids in need, at least in the public school. And in the private, in the counties, I mean, I don't know if anybody's here from WCA, but the Counties Association, we have given pretty big increases to human services, to youth aids, all those things. It does. Now, honestly, as a lot of people who know the state budget know, a lot of those are made by the department. I mean, we ultimately enact a number for the budget, but a lot of the decisions made inside the line item are decided by the Department of Health Services, Department of Corrections, whatever it would be. So, you know, if there were cuts that were made, I'm happy to have our staff meet with you and talk about some of those. But I think if one program was not effective and they wanted to put it into one that was, I think that's probably a good idea. But if they took it away from one that was effective to give it to one that's not, well, that would be dumb. So I'm happy to learn more.
Okay, so we're going to close it out here. So, you know, we've known each other a while, and I knew you when you were a student regent, for God's sake. So,
how old are you?
Yeah, I'm old. Older than you now. So, man, that's bad. Okay. We're not going to dwell on me. We're going to dwell on you. So, honestly, why do you keep doing this? Because, you know, you have to, you're the speaker, and then you have to, got to do the WisPolitics luncheon. God, why am I going to do that again? And then we have welcome all the new caucus members, run all these elections. I mean, really, you're already I've said this how many times, the longest serving speaker in Wisconsin history. That's an amazing thing. When Tom Loftus did it, we always thought, wow, is anybody ever going to be able to do that again? So it's like, really, why do you keep doing this?
Well, it's funny that you bring up Tom Loftus' name because he actually called me 2 days ago. There is a friendship, I think, among all the previous speakers, whatever party, because there are only so many people who understand what the job truly is. It's one of my favorite parts about I didn't speak in Mandarin. It's one of my favorite things about SLLF, which is the National Speakers Association. You get together with people who are Republican, Democrat, small states, big states, all have the same job, the same challenges. And the one thing that I think all of us appreciate is that states are the only place right now where anything's getting done. I don't know why any of the companies that are here would spend any money on federal lobbyists, right? What is happening in Washington, D.C. right now? Almost nothing, right? Nothing's happening in the Senate. Nothing's happening in the House. Maybe some rules, maybe some things on the side. All the actions at the states. So I think that's the exciting thing for anybody who's in state government right now. You get to actually be a place where you can have an idea and see it into reality and actually judge whether it's successful or not. That's still exciting for me. So I still love the idea of making sure we can do positive things, we can get stuff done. And the other thing, my favorite president, Calvin Coolidge. If any of you haven't read Amity Shale's biography, amazing, right? My favorite president. He said it is much more important for elected officials to stop bad things from becoming law than it is to focus on good things becoming law. So a lot of our job, frankly, right now is to stop bad things from becoming law. I don't want us to become Minnesota or Michigan. I don't want us to be a state where the last people out turn off the lights, and that's what's happening in Illinois right now. I mean, there is a mass exodus of human beings not just businesses, but people moving somewhere else because they now have full view of what it looks like to have liberal Democrats running everything. And people are leaving in droves. I don't want that to happen in Wisconsin. And I feel like we are on the precipice that if the people who live in Madison become those who govern over the rest of the state, we are going to have a place where people will flee from. And I don't want that to be Wisconsin.
All right, well, there you got to give a speech after all. All right, well, thank you, Robin Voss, the Assembly Speaker, and thank you, all of you, and thank you to all our sponsors.
Thank you very much.
As the state's leading property and casualty insurance trade association, the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance plays a crucial role in safeguarding Wisconsinites. Alliance members provide vital insurance coverage, ensuring financial protection for individuals, businesses, and communities across the state. In times of need, they act as a reliable resource, helping residents recover from unforeseen events. Ultimately, the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance and its members contribute to the resilience and well-being of Wisconsin families and businesses by offering essential protection and support. You have been watching a production of Wisconsin Eye, your unfiltered window into legislative deliberations and public policy programming, where our mission is to provide Wisconsinites an opportunity to access the legislative process and connect with conversations that inform our citizenry. Please consider supporting our mission, and thank you for watching. Wisconsin Eye, policy made public.